Hello, David Clarke here from DVC Training, and I'm going to look at the latest update for eDIUS, which is 11.2, which adds in a new filter, the auto color correction filter, as well as improving the performance of the bin. So this is a nice update for me. The big thing, of course, is the new auto color correction filter, which I'm going to talk about, but also the performance in the bin has got dramatically better, and getting close to what the performance used to be in previous versions. So the first thing is going to be the auto color correction filter. If you go to the page on the eDIUS website where they announce all the versions, you can see it's mentioned in here, but there's also a link to the FAQ. I'll put a link to that in the description. But that does explain from Grass Valley how to use the auto color correction filter, which is what I'm going to go through. It just explains the basics. Auto color correction, pretty simple. The idea is you take a filter and you throw it onto a bunch of clips and it corrects them for you automatically. Now, I don't think you're ever going to get an auto color correction filter that does an absolutely perfect job. For a start, everybody's idea of what they want their images to look like is subtly different. You might like a bit more contrast or a bit less contrast or whatever. And I think it does vary depending on the image. So I don't think you'll ever get an auto color correction filter that you can just drop on a bunch of clips and everything's perfect and you can get on with your job. And I've tried auto color correction in lots of things, the one in Resolve, etc., etc. What's really nice about this is I can dump it on a whole bunch of clips and it just does it straight away. I don't have to select a clip and click the auto button like you do in Resolve or Premiere. I can just bung it on a whole bunch of clips and it will try and correct them. And then if I don't like it, I can change it. So, for example, let's take these clips here, which I just found lying around. They're a bunch of old clips, happen to be filmed on DV, of just random shots of different bits of a product, slightly different colors, slightly different brightnesses. If I select all of those, go to color correction and grab the auto color correction filter and drop it on there, it will now go through and analyze each of those clips and set the brightness and the color. And if you have a quick scoot through those, you can see they've all come out fairly consistent in color and exposure. Now, if you don't like what the auto color correction filter does, you can just come over to it. Obviously, it just goes into the information window like everything else. You can come over to it and you can bring up this dialog box. And in here, you can see you've got the option to reanalyze a frame, little tick box to say auto color correct the brightness, or do the white balance, or do both. And then some sliders where you can fiddle with it a bit more. Fiddling with it is fairly basic because, to be perfectly honest, if you're going to start to fiddle and do something a bit more complicated, just use the primary color corrector. I reckon this is a filter that you're going to throw onto things. After you've got it fairly good, you're then going to use a primary color corrector to get the kind of thing that you want. The reason these are here is because you could come through here and set slightly different things. So suppose I look at that and said, well, I think it's always doing my shadows a bit too bright. I want my shadows to be a little bit darker, please. And I'd like it to be a little bit more towards the blue. I'd like to make that as something which it puts on every single clip as opposed to the basic one. Well, then what I can do is save that as a preset, give it a suitable name. Now, if I get rid of all these things, so I'm just going to right click, delete parts, filter video, and then make sure they're all selected and just drag that on. It's now doing the auto color correction based on those other settings. So if I go into that, they've all got those same settings. So that's kind of the point of those. You can dial in some settings which are slightly closer to your own preferences, and then it will auto color correct things based on those. Of course, you can still come through and change them individually. Once you've actually put this on here, it doesn't reanalyze or do anything unless you tell it to. So what it does is you put it on the clip, it looks at the first frame, it analyzes it, then it sets some settings. Then, if you change anything, it won't reanalyze it unless you press the reanalyze thing. Yeah, so obvious questions would be, well, what is it analyzing? Is it analyzing the whole clip or is it analyzing a particular frame? It's analyzing a frame. Pretty sure it's analyzing the first frame. So if you were looking through a clip, now this is one where nothing's happening, but if you were looking through a clip and suddenly you want the color correction to be based on there, you'd have to come into it, click reanalyze, and it would redo it based on the frame you're on. But it's only doing it on one frame. It's not going through the whole clip. It will not dynamically change the brightness, contrast, white balance across a clip. It is a very simple auto filter. You might also find out that maybe it doesn't do such a good job on the white balance. So I mean, these shots were all fairly similar, but if I came to these, which are a bit all over the place, these are probably things that you are familiar with if you've seen any of my tutorials. So if I just select those and dump the auto color corrector on there. It's done a fairly good job of getting them. They're actually all at the same brightnesses, so all the shadows and everything, but the color isn't exactly the same. That's because they are wildly different. And of course I still can come into it and then make that less blue. But yeah, I could have just put a primary color corrector on there in the first place and done it. You can also save out a variation of the filter where it just does the color or just does the brightness. In fact, they've already done that for you up here. So again, let me get rid of those. Delete parts, filter, video. And let's take on the preset that they put in there, which is brightness only. And that goes through and adjusts the brightness on all those 3 clips. So they're all fairly similar now. Color is different, but if I go into there, you'll notice that's just the same filter without white balance ticked. Or I could take my ones with the shadows a bit darker, that, dump it on there, and now I've got the same kind of darker shadows on all of them. But say here, did a pretty good job. Here, there was a bit too much variation for it to cope. And I do know from fiddling with this that just a simple change of the color temperature doesn't make that shot look like that shot. So a bit more fiddling is required. But here, did a pretty good job of making them all look the same. See, what I would do is I would take this filter and I would throw it on some clips, then I'd look at it, and then if I decided I didn't like them very much and I wanted a bit more brightness or a bit more contrast or something else, I've got them so they all look fairly consistent, then I would apply another correction on top to give them the look that I like. Now with eDIUS 11 that's fairly easy because you can just make an adjustment layer. So I'm literally going to mark an in and an out around those clips, so it just does that. Right click, new, adjustment clip. And then I'm going to take a primary color corrector, dump it on there, and just tweak it a bit so it comes out with a bit more contrast on it, or if I wanted to put some kind of sort of greeny tilky thing in the shadows and an orangey bit in the highlights or whatever. This way I would then come in and put my creative look on it. I mean, whenever you're color correcting, you basically have to get them all to look the same in the first place, and then you add on some kind of look. Let's say with eDIUS 11, I would use this adjustment clip to do it. If you're using previous versions, you don't have adjustment clips, so you'd have to put a primary color corrector on that one, and then apply the same primary color corrector to all the others. And obviously, there's nothing wrong with just stacking up effects, just like I always do with grading. I do most of my stuff with the primary color corrector, but sometimes I use the YUV, sometimes I use the 3-way, sometimes I use a combination of several of them. But what the auto color corrector did is to get them fairly consistent in the first place, and then I can put the adjustment clip on there to try and give them the look that I want. Now your other question is going to be, what about if you have a clip, say like this one here, which is filmed in some kind of log format? You know, how should you adjust that? Obviously, the first thing you can do is simply just take an auto color corrector and throw it on there and see what it does. And yeah, that actually added in a decent amount of brightness to it. If I wanted to go for my DVC one, that will make the shadows a bit darker. And probably with this, I'd want to up the saturation. And I could just take that and use it and throw it on all of my log clips. But probably a better way to do it is actually to do it in combination with the primary color corrector. This is something which has been in eDIUS for 2 or 3 versions. How you're supposed to take a log clip and make it look good is to throw on the primary color corrector and let that adjust the color space from log to proper RGB, or the project color space. Normally, you throw it on there and it does it automatically. So most clips, which are filmed in log, some other format like that, will know that they're filmed in log in the first place. You look at the clip properties and this will be set to one of these things, depending on what your camera is. Now mine is a Panasonic camera, but it's a Panasonic GH4. If the GH5 or later, it always gets this right. With the GH4, it doesn't get this right because the GH4 doesn't put this information into the metadata. So for the GH4, I'd have to do that. And then the primary color corrector would apply the LUT change or the color correction change automatically. If I opened up the primary color corrector, and you'll notice it says the source is Panasonic because it says so in the properties of the clip. If I was to put that back to what it thought it was in the first place and apply it, then obviously the primary color corrector is not doing anything because it doesn't know that it's Panasonic. But like I say, that's a problem with my Panasonic GH4 camera. And that's nothing new. That's something that eDIUS has done for ages. I mean, I would either set the color space in the properties, Or I'd come up to the color corrector here and I would say, yep, it is Panasonic. Change it for me. And that's what I would normally do if I'm taking in vlog stuff. And with the auto color corrector, I'd do that first and then I'd throw on the auto color corrector to try and get the picture to look a bit nicer, which, you know, it does do a nice little change on that to make it a nicer picture. And then if I wanted to do something else, I literally would apply another color corrector to it. So I would take on a primary color corrector and tweak it a bit. So if I'm using log footage, maybe what I want to do is I'll save out a preset with those two in it. So I would save out a preset that applies the primary color corrector and then puts on the auto color corrector. So let's take that thing, drop that on there, bang, it does both at once. It's auto color correcting and primary color correcting at the same time. And I think that's the way you should be dealing with log footage. Just bung that on there to put the LUT on first, then put that on afterwards. Of course, you don't have to. Like I said, you could just use the auto color corrector and it does a fairly good job. And of course, you don't have to use Grass Valley's way of doing it. So I've got a couple of variations here. This one is using Grass Valley's way of changing from log to Rec 709. This one is actually using the Panasonic LUT to do it. So I downloaded a thing from Panasonic, opened up the color corrector, clicked in here, and I added in the LUT that I downloaded from Panasonic, and then put it in here, and that uses the Panasonic way of doing it. The Panasonic way, as you notice, is slightly different to the Grass Valley way. Now, all this stuff about LUTs, primary color corrector, that has been the same in eDIUS for ages. Obviously, the new thing is the auto color corrector, and that's where I'd say you should probably put that on first, then the auto color corrector, then add any tweaks afterwards. And the other thing really to mention about the auto color corrector, which I didn't mention, is this one, safe color. I mean, let's take a look at this clip here. This is something I filmed donkeys years ago on a Blackmagic camera. Whack it on there. Obviously, it's produced the brightness at a decent level. Again, might like the shadows to be a bit darker. Maybe I should, instead of doing that, put this one on. So I get slightly darker shadows. And frankly, I'd probably want a little bit more saturation. And I could say, well, that's it. But the other thing I was going to mention is this thing, safe color, which presumably everybody's aware of. There is a range of brightnesses and colors, which is called safe colors. Was very, very important in the old days when we had CRT tube televisions, because if you produced something and played it and it was outside the safe color range, it would probably make the TV buzz because their brightness was beyond what it could cope with. I do remember talking to some people at the BBC and they said, yeah, if it's outside safe color ranges, that's going to make our encoders crash and then they wouldn't be able to use it. So safe color was and still is important. You want to keep things within the proper safe color ranges. You can see your color ranges in the waveform. So the waveform here for regular Rec 709, which is sort of regular color, not HDR or anything like that, it's got to be somewhere between 100 and 0. And if you tick that, it makes sure that it goes between 100 and 0. If you untick that, it'll just apply the thing to it and just spread the brightnesses out. I mean, this particular shot, if I turn it off the auto color corrector, and you can see here, without the safe color, the bright areas on the flower there pop a bit in too high. Dark areas okay, but the bright areas are not safe anymore. Now, if you're going up to YouTube or something, it probably won't make a difference. But on principle, I just like to keep something within safe color ranges. And you can see the difference as I click that to the brightnesses. It just has to pull down the brightnesses. And if you've ever used scopes in eDIUS, of course, the silly thing you've got to remember when you're looking at here, if you've got this display here on there, there's always going to be a bit of white stuff on there, which is that number. So if I go to an area where there's nothing going on, you notice I've still got the actual display of the timecode, which isn't really part of the image, is still on there. So you make sure you always ignore those two. I've got so used to it, I just completely ignore that and look at everything else. Or I just turn it off. So now I can see it without it. Control G, turn it on and off quickly, then it's not in there and it doesn't confuse you when you're trying to analyze it via the scopes here. And of course here I could also whack up the brightness a bit more, so it's getting brighter and brighter. I mean, it looks pretty awful now because it's far too bright. But because of the safe color thing, it's still within safe color ranges. If I do that, it goes outside the safe color. Of course, these things just to reset, just as you have in every other eDIUS filter. But I find that's a nice addition. I do a lot of grading and I know how to get around eDIUS fairly well. So I'm going to use it sometimes and I won't use it others. Other times I'll go straight for primary color corrections and stuff like that and carrying on what I've been doing for ages. The whole point of an auto color correction thing is to try and do things quickly for you, or if you're not entirely sure what to do, try and do something for you to make it acceptable, so at least you can improve your image a bit without too much effort. Of course, with eDIUS 11, we do have another filter that could do the same job, which is included with it. So let me just disable the auto color corrector and go to my ProDed filters and take the Picture Enhancer. Now, the Picture Enhancer is not an auto color corrector. So you notice it did something there, but it wasn't quite the same. Put on the auto color corrector, it's made it into a much nicer looking actual picture. With this particular one, it's still a little bit flat. What the Picture Enhancer does is to kind of analyze it and to try and bring out the dynamics and the brightness and stuff. So it doesn't just make the whole thing brighter or darker, it fiddles with the ranges of colors in between them and produces a different, more pleasing result. I think the way they say it's more pleasing to the eye. It's not an AI thing, it's just using an algorithm. And you can fiddle with this. So if I wanted a bit more contrast, I could do that. I want to take the brightness down, I could do that, add up the saturation and so on. And I can fiddle with these little squares and I'll get different results. I haven't found an easy way of explaining what these tiles mean, apart from if you fiddle with them, you'll get different results. You'll also notice here that you've got a self color thingy. So I can tick that just like I can with the auto color corrector. But the results are different. And now I've done that, I can take that, drop it on a whole bunch of other clips, and it'll use exactly the same settings on all the other clips. But it's not auto color correction, it is picture enhancing, as the name would suggest. The auto color corrector tries to take it so that your light bits are as light as they can be and the dark bits are as dark as they can be, and the white balance is fairly neutral. It's trying to make a good standard image, whereas the picture enhancer is trying to make it look better. Trying to change the way the darks and the shadows are. And again, quite hard to explain, but it's a bit like taking that curve in the primary color corrector and making the shadows a bit darker and the midtones a bit lighter, but doing it automatically for you. And of course I can use them together. So if I put on the auto color corrector, and let's go back and reset the picture enhancer to what it started with, and you can see I've got auto color corrector, picture enhancer. And I quite like that. I quite like that as a nice quick way of doing things. I can probably achieve the same thing using the primary color corrector. So I put that on there, made the shadows a bit darker, I think. Maybe put up the mids, take down the brights a bit so I can see a bit. Yeah, something a bit like that is probably similar to what Picture Enhancer did. Again, the whole thing is Picture Enhancer, fairly simple to throw on there and try it out and see what you like. But I can use those together. I could even use all three of them together. This is the first variation of the auto color corrector. There will be improvements coming along the line and I'll have a look at them when they come along. Now there are a bunch of other things which are in this update, which are all listed out here. But the major thing that I've had in this and a previous update is really to do with the bin. If you've been following my different videos, you'll know that the bin was redesigned. It works as an HTML panel these days, as opposed to the way it used to work. As a result, things have changed slightly. But the biggest thing about it was that it was a bit slower. So if I wanted to drag a bunch of clips in, so go off to a folder of clips, I would drag it. In eDIUS 11, you have to drag it into here. In eDIUS 10 and previous versions, I would drag it into the folder view. But if I want to drag it in to eDIUS 11, I just have to drag it into there. But that used to take a bit longer than it did in eDIUS 10. Now it's a lot quicker. Popping between different views is a lot quicker. So you pop in there and then you switch between views, it's coming up a lot quicker. Swapping between those two views or these three views was quite slow in previous versions of eDIUS 11, and I got into the habit of just sticking on one view and staying there because I got fed up with having to wait to swap. Now it's got better and it swaps between them nice and quickly. It's not perfect, so there are things like if I was to have a whole bunch of clips in a folder and I would drag up and down like this, if there's a large amount of clips in the bin, you'll notice that as I drag, it's not updating everything straight away. They disappear for a bit and then they come back. Somebody mentioned that to me the other day, which is, it's a thing eDIUS 11 has been doing. That one's not sorted out yet, but it is on the to-do list. Another thing I notice is that it takes a little bit of time for the icons to come up the first time. Sometimes I've gone to a bin with lots and lots of clips and all the icons are the same. regardless of the fact that they are actually different clips, especially if you have got lots of clips in the bin which all come from one main clip. So one of the ways I work is that I will have an hour clip, which has come off an old tape, and I will chop it up into bits and shove them all up into the bin. Well, they're all the same clip, but they just start at different points. When I open up a bin and those are in there, some of the time all the icons are exactly the same. It should jump to the in point of each clip, so each picture would be representative. And a lot of the time when I open it up the first time, it takes a bit of time for that to pop up and actually become a list of clips, or sometimes even I have to press the F5 key. So like this thing, I say, it's like a web page, and just like a web page, you can refresh it by pressing F5. So if for some reason it's not updating, just press F5 and it'll update it. But it's a lot better than it was, and I've suddenly started enjoying using it again. Up until now with eDIUS 11, it's been, okay, I can use this, but I'm missing eDIUS 10. Now I don't miss eDIUS 10 bin nearly as much. And in fact, the bin is doing, apart from silly things like this, and that bit where it doesn't update the icons, it's now pretty much to the stage where I can quite happily use it. So that for me is a biggie. In many ways for me, that's a bigger thing than the auto color corrector. So I think for a lot of people, the auto color corrector is going to be quite a time saver in actual grading. But for me, just being able to have a bin which is a lot more usable. And I've actually been using this quite a bit over Christmas, and yeah, I mean, I've had it working really well. I haven't had any problems with it. I've been working on a massive project with loads and loads and loads of clips. Not been opening up old projects because I have been working in eDIUS 11 for over a year now, so I haven't really checked that it will open up projects from old versions of eDIUS with no problems whatsoever. But on a new project we've got over 1,000 clips in it, yeah, I've been able to swap around and use the bin quite happily. I'll be interested to know what kind of results other people are having with it. And yeah, there's a couple of other things, but those are the major things. Also color correction and improvements in the bin. So I hope you found that useful. In my next video, I'm going to go back and look at some changes that have come along with the eDIUS BAT server. If you follow the channel, you'll have seen my previous versions about the BAT server. New thing that she's been made by Mick from eDIUS.net, which you can use with eDIUS, which adds a lot of nice useful things to it. He's added in some more stuff using a thing, for example, called QTMGC, which is my preferred way of deinterlacing. Might not be yours, but that one's been added into it, and a lot of other nice little things. And I've got a few things about changing batches that I can mention to you as well. So that'll be my next video, but this video really just all about those changes in eDIUS. Anyway, hope you found that useful. I would like to wish you a belated Happy Christmas and a Merry New Year. Or is it a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year? Or maybe you could do both. Have a Merry and Happy Christmas and a Merry and Happy New Year. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel, all the usual kind of stuff. And I'll see you next year.